So we got a very exciting topic today around market narratives, a thing that gets discussed a lot. And as with what I've come to realize, many things in marketing, is one of those terms that, once again, is a term that you hear, you use it, it gets thrown around, and as soon as you flip it around and say, okay, now go and do it, you don't know how to do it. Whether it's, hey, go build a strong community, or hey, go build a strong brand, or hey, craft a narrative for your project that's actually going to help number go up. You don't know how to do it. Why? Because everybody's operating on like different definitions, and there isn't a very clear way to think about it. And so that's what we're going to be deconstructing today. What the hell is a narrative? Because it can mean one thing. If you ask one person, it can mean something else when you ask another person. And once again, there still isn't a very clear way for you to be like, okay, here's a project that I have. How do we actually create a narrative that's going to serve this project? So that is on the agenda today. So of course, before we dive in, why is narrative so freaking important? Well, you should hopefully know by now that the name of the game is to get people to think about your token, your project, as being higher in demand in the future than it is today. If you don't achieve that, I don't know what to tell you. Like that's the only game that really matters. You can mess up everything else, but if you get that right, if you get the idea right of people thinking about how are things going to look in the future and how is, the demand for your token going to look in the future, if you get that right, you can mess everything else up and you'll be fine. And of course, vice versa as well. If you don't get this scenario, if you don't paint this picture of, there's a massive demand for what we do in the future without explicitly saying it oftentimes, then you can do everything right. You can have, the best designers and the best product people. No one's going to give a shit. That is the truth of it. So I like to call it FPV, future potential value. That's the name of the game. Crypto marketing. That's the name of the game. FPV. What is your FPV? What is in people's minds, what is the future potential value? And I've said it before and I'll say it 1,000 times again. No one's buying Bitcoin at 100K because they think it's going to go down to 50, right? They're buying it at 100 because they think it's going to go to 1 million. So you know this. And with that, I would like to get into the narrative side of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you a couple of narratives just to kind of set the stage here. Okay, ready? So here's the narrative for you. Every country ever has printed their fiat currency into oblivion. Here's another narrative. Bitcoin is digital gold. Here's another narrative. Wall Street is adopting crypto rails. Here's another kind of narrative. So Ethereum is the settlement layer of crypto with no downtime in 10 years. Here's another narrative. Usage of AI is going to increase by orders of magnitude in the future. And here's another narrative. NVIDIA has the most experience and makes the best GPUs. Now, here's the problem. You can call all of those things narratives, but you would be doing yourself a disservice because I read you 6 statements and 3 of them are based on my definition, a market narrative, and 3 of them are something else. You're going to want to have both, but let's deconstruct this further. So if we come back to the idea of future potential value, how do you get somebody to, in their mind, think that something is going to have a higher value in the future? Well, you need 2 ingredients. You need, 1, the future to look different from today, right? You need some change. Something has to be changing in order for the future to look different than it does today. And if that future changes, then what? Well, that brings us to the next piece. Because of this future change, there should now be an inherent increase in demand for what you do. And even with that increase in demand, you still need to be positioning yourself to capitalize on that change. So if I come back to what I was just reading, I think the most obvious example that is fairly recent that we've all seen with our own eyes is the idea that it is so obvious to any, living person in the modern world that AI usage is going to increase. Like we're already, I don't know about you, but I keep buying more and more and more AI tools, right? Whether it's paying for ChatGPT and Midjourney and Cursor and all these things, right? And so consumption of AI is increasing more and more and more. And as we start to add, robotics and that sort of thing into the picture, and you start creating a whole movie with one prompt, well, of course, the compute that you're gonna need to make a 90-minute movie versus like a 6-second clip with Google is, orders of magnitude higher. So once again, where do all the roads lead? Well, all the roads lead to a massive, massive, massive increase in demand for GPUs because they're going to be powering AIs. Very clear example. And we can go and look at NVIDIA's chart, right? Because what happened? People thought, okay, well, there's a change going on right now. And if I play this change out over the next 5 years, 10 years, what does it look like? Well, it continues to go in the same direction. Demand for compute is continuing to increase and probably accelerates as well. What happens then? What is the infrastructure that's powering all of this? Well, it's NVIDIA. I think they do like 90+%, or they own like 90+% of the market share of that market. Could be way off on that, but I think the clear point is NVIDIA is positioned very well to reap the rewards from an increase in compute demand. So that is like the most obvious example. So in this case, we have two components. We have the market narrative that explains how is the future going to change. So in this example, it's, well, the demand for compute is going to increase because we're all just going to be using AI much more throughout our lives. So that explains the change in the future, how the future looks different. So what's missing though, and this is where people call this next piece a narrative, and it can be called a narrative, but once again, you're doing yourself a disservice by calling it a narrative because now you're confusing it with the change in the future. So what that second component is really a positioning statement. That explains why your project is going to be reaping the rewards from this change in the future. So in this case, I said NVIDIA has the most experience and makes the best GPUs. And you could probably say NVIDIA has, 95% of the market share, which you'd have to fact check that. But you could call that a narrative. But once again, you're doing yourself a disservice because you're not going to know how to reverse engineer this and come up with, number one, a market narrative, a change in the future that actually suits your project. And then two, a positioning statement that also lays out why your project is automatically going to reap the rewards from that. So if we come back to the previous examples as well, so what I first said was every country ever has printed their fiat currency into oblivion. So that is actually an indirect way of saying, well, if this thing has happened like 50 times before, it's probably going to happen again, which is probably an even more powerful way to go about creating your narrative. So now we are saying that the future is going to change. How? We're saying that, for example, the US dollar, the reserve currency of the world, is going to be printed into oblivion. Why? Because we've done that before. Every currency ever in history basically does that as soon as it becomes a fiat currency. And so that's even better. Instead of saying the US dollar is going to be printed to zero, we say this has happened before 1,000 times. Here's the evidence. Now, if you come back to my previous videos and what I write about in the book, we call it the chain of conclusions, right? This is even more powerful. This is where you're not flat out saying what people should be believing explicitly. I think you get the point. So instead, we're giving them the ingredients and we allow them to bake the cake in their own mind, right? So we're saying every country ever has printed their fiat currency into oblivion, and they go, well, we have a bunch of fiat currencies now. Are they also going to be printed into oblivion? Yeah, probably. Well, let me like learn a little bit more about this. So now they've convinced themselves. You didn't kind of force your views on them. You gave them a little bit, and then they took over from there and kind of built on it. Way more powerful when it comes to persuading people. So now we have a narrative. We have the idea that the US dollar is going to zero, basically. And I was looking this up the other day, by the way. In the 90s, 10 grand is 25 grand today. In the 90s, not that long ago. So yeah, it's being the printers are doing their work. The follow-up that I had to every country ever has printed their fiat currency into oblivion was Bitcoin is digital gold. Now, many people are going to tell you, like I said, that Bitcoin is digital gold is a narrative, because once again, you could call that a narrative. You could say that is a narrative about Bitcoin. But once again, you're doing yourself a disservice because it doesn't help you understand the distinction between what is the change in the future and how is my project positioned to reap the rewards of that. So Bitcoin is digital gold is a positioning statement. It's not a market narrative. It's not describing how the future is going to change. It's describing why Bitcoin will reap the rewards of that change. The next one I had was Wall Street is adopting crypto rails. So I would go out there and find evidence for you right now. I would find a clip from the CEO of Van Eck calling Ethereum Wall Street's coin or chain or whatever term he used.
Very much what I call the Wall Street token.
And I could find a bunch of other evidence. I believe Morgan Stanley or JP Morgan are building some sort of a stable coin on Ethereum. So I can go out there and I can go and start to paint this picture. I can find Tom Lee, just, super bullish on Ethereum and having a digital asset treasury company focused on Ethereum. So I can go and find all this evidence. And now I'm painting this picture of like, hey, where's the future going? Well, the future is going that this thing that we've fucking been dreaming about in crypto. There's memes about, like the "Are you winning, son" meme, where it's like coming in, it's like the son is like, I'm, busy reorchestrating or like re-engineering the global financial system. Like that is actually happening now. Like Wall Street and crypto are actually merging. There's a lot of things happening. And I've been working at Legion lately, and we just announced our funding round not long ago from 2 TradFi companies, right? Brevin Howard and Van Eck. So speaking, or rather kind of like, watching the videos that the founders are recording with these guys, you kind of get a very close look at what those people are thinking, like the people at Van Eck. And they're super bullish. They're like one of us, so it's super cool, right? So I'm painting this picture now of where's the future going? The future is going that Wall Street and crypto is merging. And what does that mean? Well, Wall Street has to adopt some form of blockchain, right? And for now, the narrative about how the future is going to change certainly looks like Ethereum is the go-to choice. That is the thing that's being pushed very hard currently. So great, And the next thing that I said, which not a great statement, but I said Ethereum is crypto settlement layer with 0 downtime in 10 years. So that is positioning Ethereum and explaining why Ethereum is going to be the choice for Wall Street. You could probably go and make a positioning statement for Hyperliquid to beat Ethereum, right? In that race of like being adopted by Wall Street. So there you have it. In a nutshell, when we talk about narratives, when you hear people in crypto talk about narratives, I want you to dissect it even further, because I guarantee you that most people in crypto that are talking about narratives, they don't really see this distinction. Because once again, you could say that Bitcoin is digital gold is a narrative, but really, for your purposes, for understanding this and being able to use it for your own project and apply this, you want to understand that difference. So be aware of when you hear people talk about narratives and maybe see if you can see the difference there. Was this thing that they referred to a narrative actually a way that the future is going to change? Or was it explaining how some product or some project or some token is going to be well positioned for a change in the future? So how do you actually put this to work? How do you create a narrative for your project? Basically, what you want to be doing now, you want to be thinking about how the future is changing. And the way you might want to think about that is like what is already happening. So we talked about the consumption of AI, right? And you also want to be paying attention to all kinds of trends. So obviously, depending on what project you're in, you're sort of automatically going to be positioned in a certain lane. Legion, where I've been doing content now for, I think, about 6 months or so, Legion is essentially a launch pad. They want to be different in the sense that they want to be a premium launch pad where you go there for the best deals, not some overnight type of launch pad. So automatically, Legion is placed within the investing lane, you could say. And so when Legion goes about creating a narrative, it's going to be within that lane. And so I'll tell you something that I realized recently that pertains to a narrative that's going to suit Legion. And this will probably help you kind of think about your project in this sense. So I've been working on this piece of content. It's like an entertainment piece of content. It takes you through the evolution of investing. And so if you go through the evolution of investing and then you start to like look at AI, what you realize is happening is that people have always needed edge in investing. And for a long period of time, edge has sort of came through superior information, superior analysis, or superior decision making. Now, all of those three are being threatened by AI. If we can all access the same information, more or less, for the most part, we can do it instantaneously, and we all have access to the same tools for the decision making and the trading, well, a lot of edge essentially gets wiped out. So that's like one aspect of it, which is interesting. So then you think about it as an investor, how are you going to win in 10 years from now? And then the second component of this is Legion is all about democratizing access. So a lot of crypto fled to, a lot of fundraising because of the, we had the ICO boom in 2017 and 2018, and that turned into a bit of a clusterfuck. There was a lot of scams. The SEC went after people. So ICOs kind of died down almost completely. And like legitimate founders, they were too nervous to even touch it because it was too risky for them, right? Especially if they could go and raise funds from private funding, like venture capital. So then what happened was fundraising in crypto just completely went to the VCs, and then we lost the access, right? So the beauty of the ICO was we all had access, and then that all went away, and then access went to the people that were VCs. So what Legion wants to do is democratize access, but democratizing access doesn't necessarily mean that everybody who wants to get in on a deal, who wants to invest in a project early, gets in. No. What it means is that you get a chance, but you're not automatically in. And so the cool thing that the guys have built at Legion is the Legion score. So this is essentially another way to think about that is reputation. So where all this is going, like this is a long way for me to say that in the future, edge is going to come from reputation when it comes to investing. So imagine, for example, that the next Netflix was going to launch on Legion, for example. So if the next Netflix was going to launch on Legion and you knew that like, okay, this is a very promising founder that has launched a project in the past that did really well. They've got all the backing, they've got all the team, they've got all the capability. Like if that project is going to be launching on Legion, I'm going to want in on that deal. That's my, like getting in on that is my edge. Well, how do I get in on that? Well, everybody else is going to want to get in on it too. And like I said, democratizing access doesn't mean that everybody gets in. It just means everybody gets a shot. So how do you actually get in the future? Well, you have a track record as an investor. Maybe you invested in previous projects on Legion and you didn't, sell your tokens as soon as you got them, which is like not what the project wants. Maybe you have a history of like making useful introductions to, I don't know, a central exchange, for example, like to the project that you invested in. So you build up this reputation as an investor. And then when that Netflix deal comes, across your desk 10 years from now, and everybody's trying to get in on it because all the, the spot trading, we're all operating like on the same information and like there's no edge there. Then once again, the way that you get in, the way that you get edge is through your reputation. That is a narrative. So now I'm basically saying that Legion score is your edge. So that's like the narrative side of it. So what you want to do there is you want to go and see where is the world going as it pertains to the lane that you're in. So in this case, we talked about investing. And what you really want to do here is just start asking ChatGPT. Like if you're clueless, just start asking ChatGPT and you really know the difference between AI slop and like thoughtful, useful stuff. And the difference, of course, is like the prompt or how deep you go. So you don't just want to like put in a prompt and like grab some generic BS statement from ChatGPT. You're going to want to like dig into the weeds here, okay? And the other thing that I'll say here is probably that the more disruptive your thinking is here, the better it is. So the bigger you think, the better it's going to be. You don't want to create some narrative that's like a slight change in the future. Like, hey, because of this thing, this company is going to be doing like 10% better. No, like you want a complete disruption where it's like, this incumbent is going to be completely out of business and this newcomer is going to be like the go-to, right? You can say like crypto versus Wall Street, for example. You want to have the future that you're painting to be completely disruptive on that level, unless you're trying to make some coin that's like $1 million market cap. Basically, the bigger market cap your goal is, the bigger disruption you need to be storytelling around. Yeah. So the future needs to change in some dramatic way in order for you to compel people to see that vision and to want to act on it. So then we have the second part. Remember, it's a 1-2 punch, right? So now the beauty is that if people understand what you do, just like with no marketing, BS around it, just like flat out understand the utility. If you've done a good job with your narrative, with explaining how the future is going to change, you're going to automatically be generating a lot more demand there. But you can, of course, just continue to improve that, right? Especially if you're kind of unknown and there are other players that are going to be like the automatic choice. Like if you painted this picture of like central exchanges are going to own the world, then Binance is automatically going to be the one that's going to reap the most of the rewards, right? So then you would also have to kind of position yourself. You would almost need like a narrative that explains why why Binance is going to go out of business and why your central exchange would take over. But coming back to it, the beauty is if you do the future change well enough, if you do the narrative part well enough, a lot of the demand is completely automatic and inherent because it should be directly connected to your project. And the other thing that I want to make sure that I say here is that a lot of you are going to be coming from a place where you can craft the actual narrative or like come up with it, but you can't sell it to people. And this is where you need to be borrowing credibility from other people. If you can, you absolutely have to. So when I was describing the Wall Street thing before, I was talking about the CEO of Van Eck. I was talking about Tom Lee from Fundstrat, I think. I might have mentioned something else too. But if I was, incentivized to push the Wall Street, or sorry, the Wall Street is coming to Ethereum or choosing Ethereum narrative, I would be making, of course, I would have like our own white paper or like our own thesis or whatever that explains this future, but I would absolutely very much be borrowing credibility and authority from other people, such as the CEO of Van Eck and Tom Lee. So I would be getting content that they have put out, and I would be using it to push the future that I want you to buy into. So very important piece here. And I think I'll throw in one more analogy. For those of you who have read my book, you will already have heard it. It's possible that I've even talked about it previously in a video, but just to help you kind of finalize this one more time. So the analogy that I wrote in the book when I tried to explain this was, if you imagine that there's an ultra marathon, let's say 100-mile race in the desert, 8 hours of running in the desert, and they've ran out of water, and for whatever reason, the organizers haven't sorted it out. So they're dying, okay? And they're only halfway through. And they're in the desert, and there's a booth in the desert. And in the booth, the guy just has a bunch of empty water bottles. He has no water. And they've also ran out of water. And he tells them, look, in 1 kilometer, there is a place to get water. But they don't have any cups, they don't have any bottles, nothing. So like, you can drink a little bit, but you're not able, like there's no more water after that until the end of the race. So you still get another 8 hours of running to do. So you can just continue and like you can have a little bit of a drink, but after that, like that's it. You can't bring any more water with you. However, I can sell you this empty water bottle right now. And then when you get to that station, you can not only have a big drink, but you can also fill up your water bottle and take it with you. So now we've done the 1-2 punch. We've explained a future where I'm going to be toast. Yeah, because I've got a lot of running left to do and I don't have any water, but there's hope for me because there's water coming. But I do have a problem still. And because of that future that I've explained of like reaching the water station, the demand for what I'm selling is automatic now. I have empty water bottles, okay? So you can see how this thing works together very much inherently. Now, of course, if there were 5 different booths, the positioning that I'm working on becomes more important because now I have to not only be in demand because of the change in the future, but I also have to be in demand compared to the other competitors. So you want to, there's different ways to do that. We'll probably have to make a separate video, but you could be the low cost option. You could be the high quality option. Feel free to just hit ChatGPT for now when it comes to positioning, because there's many different ways you can position yourself. The point here is really to understand the nuances between a change in the future and positioning yourself to capitalize on it, which again is largely automatic. And with that, I hope you've learned a lot in this one. This is one of the most important parts of crypto marketing, because why? Well, it comes back to future potential value. How do you change how somebody thinks about your project's future potential value? Well, you have to explain what's going to happen in the future. You have to explain, although a lot of it is inherent and automatic, you have to explain why your project is set to capitalize on that. And then if you want to throw something else in there, which is very much sort of part of this big picture, is to throw in your vision. And we've talked about that before, but your vision is really just saying, here's where we're aiming, right? And it should be some statements that you'll never reach, but it's very clear where you're going. So Microsoft has I think they said they want to have a computer on every desk in every home. It's like very clear what they're trying to do. They'll never get there, but that's not the point of the vision. The point of the vision is to show this is what we're trying to do. Okay, I hope you have an awesome day. I hope you've learned a lot, and I'm curious to see what you come up with this. So once again, when you have your project, when you're thinking about the future, it's got to be, the bigger your goals are, the more disruptive you got to be. So go out there and cook up some stuff, and I'd love to see it. All right, I'll see you in a couple of months, maybe. I don't know. Have a good one.